stormy night, a locked manor, a scream that stops your heart, yet no one speaks of why. Hercule Poirot steps into the shadows to unravel a motive that refuses to whisper its truth. Chapter 1. The Arrival at Blackwood. The windows of Blackwood Manor, a sprawling estate nestled deep in the English countryside, as a sleek black car pulls up to its iron gates. Inside, Hercule Poirot, the famed Belgian detective with his impeccable mustache and sharper mind, adjusts his coat against the chill. He's been summoned by an urgent letter from Lady Eleanor Blackwood, a widow known for her wealth and secrecy. The letter was cryptically a plea for help and a mention of a death that wasn't what it seemed. Poirot, never one to resist a puzzle, steps out into the storm, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the gravel. The manor looms ahead, its Gothic spires cutting through the mist like silent sentinels. The air feels heavy, not just with rain but with something unspoken, something hidden behind the manor's stone walls. As Poirot approaches the grand oak doors, they creak open, revealing Mr. Grayson, the butler, a man with a face as unreadable as a blank page. "Monsieur Poirot, welcome," he says, his voice clipped, betraying no emotion. Inside, the manor is a maze of opulence, crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, and portraits of stern-faced ancestors staring down from the walls. Poirot's gray cells, as he calls them, are already at work. Noting the faint smell of cigar smoke lingering in the air and the way Grayson's hands tremble slightly as he takes Poirot's coat, the detective is led to the drawing room where Lady Eleanor awaits, her silk gown shimmering in the firelight. She's a woman in her late 50s, elegant but tense, her eyes darting to the door as if expecting an intruder. "Monsieur Poirot, thank you for coming," she begins, her voice low but steady. She explains the reason for his summons, her brother-in-law. "Sir Reginald Blackwood was found dead in his study 3 days ago, the door locked from the inside. The local police ruled it a suicide, a single gunshot to the temple, the pistol still in his hand. But Lady Eleanor insists it was murder. Reginald was not a man to end his own life," she says firmly. "He was complicated, but not despairing." She mentions odd details. A missing key to the study, a cryptic note found in Reginald's pocket that read "Only silent, no more," and whispers among the staff of a stranger seen near the estate the night before his death. Poirot listens, his head tilted slightly, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. He asks to see the study, and Lady Eleanor nods, leading him through dimly lit corridors. The study is a time capsule of Sir Reginald's life bookshelves stuffed with leather-bound tomes, mahogany desk cluttered with papers and a faint stain of blood on the Persian rug. Poirot kneels, examining the scene with the precision of a jeweler. The window is shut tight, the lock undisturbed, and the key to the room is still missing. He picks up a small silver cigarette case on the desk, noting a faint scratch on its surface, as if it had been dropped. "Curio," he mutters, his mind already spinning through possibilities. Lady Eleanor watches him, wringing her hands. "See, Monsieur Poirot? Something is wrong here. I feel it in my bones." Poirot nods, his expression unreadable. He asks about the household. Who was present that night? Lady Eleanor lists them: her daughter Clara, a spirited young woman; Dr. Harold Vance, the family physician; Mrs. Agnes Poole, the housekeeper; and Grayson, the butler. She admits, had their own tensions with Sir Reginald. But she refuses to elaborate, her lips tightening. Poirot's investigation begins here, in this locked room where a man died and left behind more questions than answers. He decides to interview each member of the household, starting with Clara, who Lady Eleanor says was closest to Reginald. As he leaves the study, Poirot notices a faint scuff mark on the floor near the door, barely visible in the flickering light. He pauses, his mind cataloging every detail, every inconsistency. The manor is a puzzle, and Poirot knows the pieces are scattered among its inhabitants. The rain continues to pound outside as if urging him to hurry. The truth, he senses, is buried deep, and he must dig carefully to unearth it. This is just the beginning of our journey into Blackwood Manor secrets. Next, we'll follow Poirot as he meets Clara and uncovers the first threads of a tangled web. Stay tuned for more. Chapter 2. Clara's Secrets. The morning sun barely pierces the heavy curtains of Blackwood Manor as Hercule Poirot makes his way to the conservatory, where Clara Blackwood agreed to meet him. The glass-walled room is a jungle of exotic plants, their leaves glistening with dew, and the air smells of damp earth and roses. Clara, a woman in her mid-20s, with sharp green eyes and a restless energy, sits on a wicker chair, her fingers twisting a silk scarf. She's dressed in a simple but elegant navy dress, her auburn hair pinned loosely, as if she couldn't be bothered with perfection. Poirot observes her closely, noting the way her gaze flicks to the door, her posture tense like a bird ready to take flight. He greets her with a polite bow, his voice smooth and disarming, designed to put her at ease. "Mademoiselle Clara, I am here to understand your uncle, Sir Reginald, and the events before his death. Will you help me?" Clara's lips curve into a faint guarded smile. She agrees, but warns him she doesn't know much. Poirot settles into a chair opposite her, his hands folded neatly, his eyes never leaving her face. He begins with gentle questions about her relationship with Sir Reginald. Clara describes him as a distant but kind figure, a man obsessed with his rare book collection and private business dealings. He kept to himself mostly, she says, her voice soft but steady. He'd spend hours in his study, reading or writing letters. But he always made time for me, especially after Father died. Poirot nods, encouraging her to continue, sensing there's more beneath her calm exterior. He asks about the night of Reginald's death. Clara hesitates, her fingers tightening on the scarf. "I was in my room reading. I heard nothing until the gunshot. It was so loud it echoed through the house." Poirot's gray cells hum as he probes further, asking about the stranger Lady Eleanor mentioned, the one seen near the estate. Clara's eyes narrow slightly, and she shrugs. "I don't know anything about that. The staff talk. You know how they are, always spinning stories." But her voice wavers, just enough for Poirot to notice. He shifts tactics, asking about the cryptic note found in Reginald's pocket, the one that read "Silent no more." Clara claims ignorance, but her fingers stop moving, frozen mid-twist. Poirot doesn't press, instead asking about her interactions with the rest of the household. She speaks of Dr. Vance as a family friend who often visited, always carrying his black medical bag, and of Mrs. Poole, the housekeeper, as loyal but overly curious. Grayson, the butler, she describes as stiff, like a statue, but dependable. The conversation deepens. Poirot notices a small sketchbook on the table beside Clara. Its pages filled with intricate pencil drawings of flowers and landscapes. He compliments her work, and for a moment her guard drops, her face lighting up. She says, but her pride is evident. Poirot seizes the moment, asking if she ever sketched her uncle or the manor's grounds. Nods, flipping open the book to reveal a detailed drawing of the manor's garden, complete with a shadowy figure near the hedge. "Who is this?" Poirot asks, pointing to the figure. Clara's smile fades. "Just imagination," she mutters, closing the book quickly. Poirot doesn't push, but his mind files away the image, the figure's vague outline nagging at him. He then asks about any tensions with Sir Reginald. Clara stiffens, her voice sharpening. "Uncle had his disagreements like anyone. He was stubborn, especially about money. But nothing serious." Poirot notes the edge in her tone, the way her eyes avoid his. He changes the subject, asking about her plans for the future. Clara relaxes slightly, talking vaguely about traveling, perhaps to Paris or Rome, to study art. But her enthusiasm feels forced, as if she's hiding a deeper longing or fear. Poirot thanks her for her time, standing with a polite smile. "You have been most helpful, mademoiselle. I shall speak with you again, perhaps." Clara nods, but as he turns to leave, he catches her reflection in the conservatory glass, her face pale, her hands clutching the sketchbook tightly. As Poirot exits the conservatory, the scent of roses lingers, but so does the sense that Clara knows more than she's saying. Her sketch, her hesitations, her guarded demeanor, they're pieces of the puzzle, and Poirot is determined to place them. He decides his next step is to speak with Dr. Vance, the physician who was present the night of the death.
Commenters,
Secrets are starting to surface, like ripples on a still pond, and Poirot knows each conversation will stir them further. The truth is close, but it's slippery, and he must tread carefully to catch it. Chapter 3. The doctor's testimony. Hercule Poirot navigates the labyrinthine halls of Blackwood Manor, his polished shoes clicking softly on the polished oak floors. As he heads toward the library where Dr. Harold Vance has agreed to meet. The library is a cavernous room, its towering shelves packed with dusty tomes, and the faint scent of old leather and ink hanging in the air. Dr. Vance, a wiry man in his early 60s with thinning gray hair and spectacles perched low on his nose, stands by a window, staring out at the manicured gardens. His hands are clasped behind his back, but Poirot notices a slight tremor in them as he turns to greet the detective. "Monsieur Poirot, a pleasure," Vance says, his voice clipped but courteous, though his eyes betray a flicker of unease. Poirot smiles warmly, settling into a backed chair, his demeanor calm but piercing, ready to unravel the doctor's story. Poirot begins by asking about Dr. Vance's role in the household. The doctor explains he's been the Blackwood family physician for over 2 decades, tending to their ailments and offering counsel during difficult times. "Sir Reginald trusted me," he says, adjusting his spectacles. "I was here often, checking on Lady Eleanor's nerves or Clara's occasional headaches." Poirot nods, his fingers steepled, and asks about the night of Sir Reginald's death. Vance's expression tightens. "I was visiting to deliver some medicine for Lady Eleanor," he says. "I heard the gunshot around 9 in the evening. I rushed to the study, but the door was locked. Grayson had to fetch a spare key from the housekeeper's quarters before we could enter." Poirot's eyes narrow slightly, noting the mention of a spare key, a detail not yet clarified. The detective probes further, asking what Vance saw when they entered the study. The doctor describes the scene vividly. Sir Reginald slumped over his desk, pistol in his hand, blood pooling on the blotter. "It looked like suicide," Vance says, his voice steady but his fingers twitching. "I examined him briefly. Death was instantaneous. The wound was consistent with a self-inflicted shot." Poirot tilts his head, his mind racing. He asks if anything seemed unusual. Vance hesitates, then mentions a glass of brandy on the desk, untouched, which struck him as odd since Reginald was known to enjoy a drink in the evenings. "It was full, not a sip taken," Vance adds, almost as an afterthought. Poirot files this away, his curiosity piqued by the untouched glass. Shifting gears, Poirot inquires about Sir Reginald's health and state of mind. Vance insists Reginald was in good physical health, with no signs of serious illness. Mentally, he was preoccupied, the doctor admits. He'd been more withdrawn lately, muttering about old debts and promises. But suicidal? I wouldn't have thought so. Poirot senses a crack in Vance's polished narrative and asks about the cryptic note, silent no more. The doctor shrugs, claiming he never saw it, though his eyes dart briefly to the side. Poirot then asks about the stranger reportedly seen near the estate. Vance's face hardens. "Village gossip," he says dismissively. "People see shadows and invent stories." But his tone is too quick, too sharp. And Poirot's gray cells hum with suspicion to lighten the mood. Poirot compliments the library, gesturing to a medical journal on a nearby table. "You keep up with your profession, doctor?" he asks. Vance relaxes slightly, nodding. "I try. Medicine moves fast, even for an old country doctor." Poirot uses this to pivot, asking if Vance ever prescribed anything unusual for Sir Reginald. The doctor shakes his head, but his fingers grip the armrest a bit too tightly. "It's just the usual tonics, nothing more." But Poirot smiles, letting the silence stretch, knowing it often coaxes out truth. Vance shifts uncomfortably but says nothing further. The detective then asks about the household dynamics, particularly any tensions. Vance is vague, mentioning only that Reginald could be difficult with the staff and that Clara sometimes clashed with him over her future. As the interview ends, Poirot stands, thanking Vance with his usual courtesy. "You have given me much to consider, doctor," he says, his tone light but his eyes sharp. Vance nods, but as Poirot turns to leave, he notices a small leather notebook tucked into the doctor's coat pocket, its edge worn, as if frequently handled. It's a tiny detail, but to Poirot, it's another piece of the puzzle. He decides his next step is to speak with Mrs. Agnes Poole, the housekeeper who might shed light on the manor's inner workings. The air in the library feels heavier now, as if the books themselves are holding their breath, waiting for the truth to emerge. Poirot's mind is a whirl of clues: the untouched brandy, the spare key, the doctor's guarded demeanor, and he knows the manor's secrets are starting to crack open, one conversation at a time. Chapter 4. The housekeeper's watchful eyes. Hercule Poirot steps into the bustling heart of Blackwood Manor's kitchen, where the air is thick with the scent of freshly baked bread and simmering stew. The room is a stark contrast to the manor's grand halls, its stone walls, and copper pots, giving it a warm, lived-in feel. Mrs. Agnes Poole, the housekeeper, stands at a sturdy oak table, her hands deftly peeling potatoes, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun. She's a stout woman in her late 50s, her face lined with years of hard work, but her eyes are sharp, missing nothing. Poirot greets her with a polite nod, his mustache twitching slightly as he takes in the orderly chaos of the kitchen. Madame Poole, I am Hercule Poirot, and I seek to understand the events surrounding Sir Reginald's death. May we speak? His voice is gentle, designed to put her at ease, but his gaze is piercing. Mrs. Poole wipes her hands on her apron and gestures to a small stool by the hearth. I've time, monsieur, but I'm not one for idle talk, she says, her tone brisk, but not unkind. Poirot sits, his posture impeccable, and begins by asking about her role in the manor. She explains she's managed the household for 30 years, overseeing staff, meals, and the manor's upkeep. This place runs like clockwork because I make it so, she says with a touch of pride. Poirot smiles, encouraging her to share. Her observations about the night Sir Reginald died, Mrs. Poole's hands pause, and she looks at him squarely. I was in my quarters, balancing the accounts when I heard the shot. Didn't go to the study, right? O'Wagerson came for the spare key first. Took me a minute to find it. It's kept in a locked box. Rose's interest sharpens at the mention of the key. He asks where it's usually stored and who has access. Mrs. Poole explains the box is in her office. It's a small room off the kitchen, and only she and Grayson hold keys to it. It was there that morning, I'm sure of it, she says, but her brow furrows, as if recalling something unsettling. Poirot presses gently, asking if anyone could have taken it. She shakes her head, but her confidence wavers. No one's been in my office without me knowing. But things have been odd lately. Items moved, papers out of place. Poirot's gray cells buzz, and he asks about the cryptic note found on Sir Reginald. Silent no more. Mrs. Poole's face tightens. I never saw such a thing. Sounds like nonsense to me, she says, but her tone is too quick, too dismissive. Shifting to the household. Poirot asks about Sir Reginald's relationships with the staff and family. Mrs. Poole is cautious but candid. He was a hard man to please, she admits. Always fussing over details, wanted his meals just so. His books dusted a certain way. He'd snap at Grayson or me if things weren't perfect, but it was just his way. He and Miss Clara had their rows, though. She's headstrong, that one. Always talking about leaving for some art school abroad. Sir Reginald didn't like it. Poirot nods, noting the tension, but steering the conversation to the stranger. Seen near the estate. Mrs. Poole's eyes narrow. I saw someone myself late that evening by the garden gate. A man, I think in a dark coat. Couldn't see his face, told Grayson, but he said it was probably a poacher. Poirot leans forward, intrigued. He asks if she noticed anything unusual in the days leading up to the death. Mrs. Poole hesitates, then mentions hearing raised voices from Sir Reginald's study a few nights before a man's voice, not one she recognized. I didn't catch the words, but it sounded heated. She says, I didn't pry. It's not my place. Poirot senses her loyalty to the family, but also her curiosity, a trait he can use. He asks about Dr. Vance's visits. Mrs. Poole shrugs. He's here often, always with that bag of his. It's nice enough, but he keeps to himself. Poirot notices. a slight edge in her voice, as if she distrusts the doctor's frequent presence. As the conversation winds down, Poirot spots a small brass key on a chain around Mrs. Poole's neck, half hidden by her collar. "Is that the key to your office?" Lightly. She tucks it away, flustered. "Just a habit, keeping it close," she says. Poirot smiles, thanking her for her time, but his mind is racing. The spare key, the stranger, the heated argument, these are threads in a tapestry he's only beginning to weave. He decides to speak with Grayson next, hoping the butler's reserved demeanor might hide its own revelations. As he leaves the kitchen, Mrs. Poole returns to her potatoes, but Poirot catches her watching him, her eyes sharp and wary. The manor's secrets are like the roots of its ancient trees, deep, tangled, and hard to unearth. But Poirot is determined to trace them. To their source? Chapter 5. The butler's composure Hercule Poirot makes his way to the servants' hall. A narrow, dimly lit corridor lined with polished brass fixtures and faded photographs of Blackwood Manor's past staff. The air is cooler here, carrying the faint scent of wax polish and starch. Mr. Grayson. The butler stands at a small desk, meticulously arranging a silver tray for afternoon tea. He's a tall, angular man in his late 40s, his black suit immaculate, his face a mask of professional calm. His movements are precise, almost mechanical, as he aligns a teacup with surgical accuracy. Poirot approaches, his own demeanor polished but warm, designed to pierce Grayson's stoic exterior. "Monsieur Grayson, I am Hercule Poirot, and I wish to discuss the night of Sir Reginald's death. I have a moment of your time?" Grayson's gray eyes meet Poirot's, unblinking, and he nods. Setting the tray aside, Poirot begins by asking about Grayson's duties, easing into the conversation. The butler explains he served the Blackwood family for 15 years, managing the household's daily operations and attending to Sir Reginald's particular needs. He was a man of routine, Grayson says, his voice even, almost monotone. Dinner at 7, papers sorted by 9, and always a cigar before bed. Poirot nods, his fingers brushing his mustache, and asks about the night of the death. Grayson's account is crisp. He was in the dining room, polishing silver, when the gunshot rang out. "It was just after 9, he says. "I ran to the study, but the door was locked. I fetched the spare key from Mrs. Poole's office and opened it with Dr. Vance." Poirot notes the consistency with Vance's story, but presses for details. About the key's retrieval, Grayson's composure holds, but his hands clasp briefly behind his back. "Mrs. Poole handed me the key from her box. It took a moment. She was flustered, as we all were." Poirot tilts his head, asking if the key was where it should have been. Grayson hesitates, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "Yes, as far as I know, I don't handle it often." Poirot shifts to the scene inside the study, asking what Grayson noticed. The butler describes Sir Reginald's body slumped over the desk, the pistol in his hand, and the faint smell of gunpowder. "Everything was in place," he says, but Poirot catches a slight pause, as if Grayson is choosing his words. The detective asks about the untouched brandy glass Dr. Vance mentioned. Grayson confirms it, adding, "Sir Reginald rarely left a drink unfinished. It was unusual." Poirot's gray cells hum as he inquires about the note. Silent, no more. Grayson claims he didn't see it, his tone flat, but his eyes flicker briefly to the floor. The detective changes tack, asking about the stranger Mrs. Poole saw near the garden gate. Grayson's jaw tightens. "I heard the talk, but I saw no. 1, the grounds are large. People sometimes wander too close." His dismissal is polite, but firm, and Poirot senses a wall going up. He asks about Sir Reginald's behavior in the days before his death. Grayson admits the master seemed tense, often locking himself in his study for hours. "He received a letter a week ago," Grayson adds, almost reluctantly. "He read it, then burned it in the fireplace. I saw the ashes when I cleaned." This detail sparks Poirot's interest, and he presses gently, asking if Grayson overheard any arguments or unusual visitors. The butler shakes his head, but his fingers twitch, betraying a crack in his calm. "Sir Reginald kept his business private. If he argued, it wasn't in my presence." Poirot nods, then asks about the household's dynamics, particularly with Clara and Dr. Vance. Grayson is guarded, saying only that Clara was spirited and Dr. Vance was a regular guest, always welcome. But his tone carries a hint of reserve, as if he's holding back judgment. Poirot notices a small pocket watch on the desk, its chain coiled neatly. A fine timepiece, he remarks, watching Grayson's reaction. The butler nods curtly, a gift from Sir Reginald years ago. As the conversation ends, Poirot thanks Grayson, his smile polite, but his mind racing. The burned letter, the untouched brandy, the butler's unyielding composure, these are clues, subtle but significant. He decides to revisit the study too, examine it in daylight, and search for traces of that mysterious letter's ashes. As he leaves the servants' hall, he glances back at Grayson, who has resumed arranging the tray, his movements as precise as ever. But Poirot senses the butler is more than a servant. He's a keeper of secrets, and those secrets are starting to weigh on him. The Manor's puzzle grows more intricate, and Poirot knows each piece he uncovers brings him closer to the truth. Hidden just beneath the surface of Blackwood's polished facade. Chapter 6. The study's hidden clues, it includes Hercule. Poirot returns to the study of Blackwood Manor, where the morning light filters through heavy velvet curtains, casting long shadows across the room. The space feels quieter now, almost reverent, but the faint scent of old blood and cigar smoke lingers, a reminder of the tragedy that unfolded here. The mahogany desk, still cluttered with papers, stands as the centerpiece, its surface marked by that dark stain Poirot noted on his first visit. He closes the door behind him, ensuring privacy, and begins a meticulous examination, his gloved hands moving with the precision of a watchmaker. His gray cells are alert, seeking the subtle traces that might unlock the mystery of Sir Reginald's death. The room, he senses, holds secrets that no one in the household has yet revealed. Poirot starts with the fireplace, recalling Grayson's mention of a burned letter. He kneels, sifting through the ashes with a small brass poker. Most are cold and powdery, but he finds a few charred fragments, their edges curled like blackened petals. Carefully, he collects them in a handkerchief, noting faint traces of ink too. Faint to read, but enough to confirm a document was deliberately destroyed. Why burn a letter, unless it holds a truth too dangerous to keep? He murmurs, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. He tucks the fragments away, intending to examine them later under better light. Next, he turns to the desk, methodically sorting. Through the papers, business ledgers, book catalogs, and a few personal letters, none recent. But beneath a stack, he finds a small, leather-bound journal, its lock broken, as if forced open. Opening the journal, Poirot discovers pages filled with Sir Reginald's tight, precise handwriting notes on rare books, mostly, but also cryptic. Entries about debts repaid and promises kept. One entry, dated a week before his death, reads, "He knows. I cannot hide it longer." Poirot's pulse quickens. Who is he? What couldn't be hidden? He slips the journal into his pocket, knowing it's a vital clue. Moving to the window, he examines the latch again, confirming it's secure. With no signs of tampering, the room's single entrance, the locked door, remains a puzzle. How could a murderer enter and leave without a key? He inspects the doorframe, running his fingers along the wood, and notices a faint chip in the paint near the lock, barely visible, as if something sharp had grazed it. Poirot then focuses on the untouched brandy glass Dr. Vance and Grayson mentioned. It sits on a silver tray, its amber liquid gleaming in the light. He lifts it carefully, sniffing the contents. The scent is rich but untainted. No trace of poison or sedative, yet its presence nags at him. Sir Reginald, a man of habit, would have sipped it unless interrupted. Poirot sets the glass down and examines the pistol, still in police custody. But described as a standard revolver, its grip worn from use. He mentally reconstructs the scene, the shot, the locked door, the missing key. Something doesn't align, and his mind churns through possibilities. He notices a small rug near the desk, slightly askew, and lifts it to reveal a faint scratch on the floorboard, as if something heavy was dragged. Stepping back, Poirot surveys the room, his eyes lingering on the bookshelves. He scans the titles, pulling out a few volumes at random. Behind one, a first edition Dickens, he finds a folded slip of paper, yellowed with age. It's a receipt for a book purchase, dated 10 years ago, made out to a Mr. J. Carver. The name is unfamiliar, but Poirot tucks it away, sensing it may connect to the stranger seen near the estate. His investigation is interrupted by a soft knock at the door. It's Clara, her face pale, holding her sketchbook. "I thought you'd be here," she says, her voice hesitant. "I found something in my drawings. It might help." She opens the book to a sketch of the garden. The shadowy figure now more defined, a man in a long coat, his face obscured. Poirot's eyes narrow. "When did you draw this, mademoiselle?" Clara admits it was the night before her uncle's death, from her bedroom window. Poirot thanks her, his mind racing. The journal, the ashes, the receipt, and now Clara's sketched these are pieces of a puzzle that's growing more complex. He decides to confront Lady Eleanor next, to press her on the family's past and this mysterious J. Carver. As he leaves the study, the weight of the journal in his pocket feels heavier, its cryptic words echoing in his mind. The manners. Secrets are like shadows, shifting just out of reach. But Poirot is determined to bring them into the light, one careful step at a time. Chapter 7. Lady Eleanor's Burden. Hercule Poirot strides through the grand hall of Blackwood Manor, the echo of his footsteps swallowed by the thick tapestries that line the walls, their faded threads depicting scenes of long-forgotten hunts. The afternoon light pours through tall windows, painting the marble floor in golden patches, but the air feels heavy with unspoken truths. Poirot has requested a private audience with Lady Eleanor Blackwood, and she's agreed to meet him in the parlor, a room of delicate elegance with rosewood furniture, porcelain vases, and a grand piano that hasn't been played in years. He adjusts his tie, his mind buzzing with the clues he's gathered, the burned letters, ashes, the cryptic journal, the receipt for J. Carver, and Clara's sketch of a shadowy figure. Lady Eleanor, he suspects, holds the key to tying these threads together. He must tread carefully to uncover what she's been guarding so fiercely. As Poirot enters the parlor, Lady Eleanor stands by a window, her silhouette framed against the light, her silver hair gleaming like a crown. She turns, her face composed, but her eyes betraying a quiet strain, like a tightly wound spring. "Monsieur Poirot, I hope you're making progress," she says, her voice steady, but tinged with urgency. She gestures to a plush armchair, and Poirot sits, his posture impeccable, his hands folded neatly in his lap. He begins with a gentle tone, thanking her for her hospitality, then shifts to the matter at hand. "Madame, I must ask you about Sir Reginald's past, his business, his enemies, his secrets. There are signs that his death was no simple act. Will you help me understand?" His words are soft but deliberate, designed to coax rather than confront. Lady Eleanor's fingers tighten on the back of a chair, but she nods, settling opposite him. She speaks of Reginald as a private man, devoted to his rare book collection and his investments, which kept the manor afloat. "He was not one for sentiment," she says, her voice low. "After my husband and his brother died, Reginald took on the family's burdens. He was protective in his way." Poirot listens, noting the careful choice of words, and asks, "About any recent troubles?" Lady Eleanor hesitates, her gaze drifting to the piano. "He was agitated in the weeks before," she admits. "He spoke of old matters resurfacing, things he thought buried, but he wouldn't confide in me fully." Poirot seizes on this, asking about the journal he found, particularly the entry about "he knows" and "promises kept." Pales, and she claims ignorance of the journal's contents. But her hands betray her. Trembling slightly as she smooths her skirt, Poirot shifts to the receipt for J. Carver, showing her the yellowed paper. "Do you know this name, madame?" he asks. Lady Eleanor's eyes flicker with recognition, but she shakes her head. "It's unfamiliar," she says, too quickly. Poirot doesn't press, instead asking about the burned letter Grayson mentioned. Her composure cracks, just for a moment. "Reginald often burned correspondence," she says, her voice tight. He valued privacy. But Poirot senses she's deflecting, and he pivots to the stranger scene near the estate. A man in a dark coat, perhaps this carver, he suggests, watching her closely. Lady Eleanor's lips thin. I told you before, monsieur, I know nothing. Of strangers, the staff exaggerate. Her tone is sharp, a warning to drop the subject, but Poirot's gray cells are alight. Sensing her fear to ease the tension, Poirot compliments the parlor's decor, noting a small framed photograph. On a side table, a younger Lady Eleanor with two men, one resembling Sir Reginald. The other unfamiliar, with sharp features and a dark coat. A family portrait? He asks lightly. Lady Eleanor's expression softens, then hardens again. It's an old friend, long gone, she says curtly, turning the frame face down. Poirot files this away, his mind connecting the man in the photo to Clara's sketch. He asks about Reginald's relationships with the household: Clara, Dr. Vance, Mrs. Poole, Grayson. Lady Eleanor describes Clara as willful but loving, Dr. Vance as a trusted confidant, and the staff is loyal, though she admits Reginald's demands strained their patience. He was particular, she says, but fair. Poirot notes the absence of warmth in her words, as if she's reciting a rehearsed defense. As the conversation deepens, Poirot circles back to the note, silent. No more. Could it refer to a secret Reginald kept? He asks. Lady Eleanor's eyes meet his, and for a moment he sees a flicker of panic. I don't know, she whispers, her voice barely audible. Reginald had his shadows, as we all do. Poirot leans forward, his voice gentle but firm. Madame, if there's something you withhold, it may be the key to justice. Trust Hercule Poirot. She looks away, her hands clasped tightly. There are things best left buried, she says finally, her voice heavy with regret. Poirot doesn't push further, sensing she's on the edge of breaking. He thanks her, rising with a polite bow, but his mind is racing. The photograph, her evasions, the journal's cryptic words, they point to a past she's desperate to conceal. As he leaves the parlor, Poirot glances back at Lady Eleanor, now staring out the window, her posture rigid. The manor's secrets are like a locked box, and she holds the key, whether she admits it or not. He decides to investigate the grounds next, to search for signs of the stranger in Clara's sketch. Perhaps near the garden. Chapter 8. Shadows in the Garden. Hercule Poirot steps out into the crisp air of Blackwood Manor's sprawling gardens, where the late afternoon sun casts long dappled shadows across manicured hedges and rose beds. The grounds are a masterpiece of order, with gravel paths winding through neatly trimmed shrubs and a stone fountain gurgling softly at the center, but Poirot's keen eyes are drawn to the edges, where the garden meets the wilder expanse of the estate's wooded boundary. Clara's sketch of a shadowy figure and Mrs. Poole's mention of a stranger by the garden gate linger in his mind, urging him to explore the grounds for physical traces of this elusive presence. He adjusts his hat against the breeze, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, begins his investigation. His gray cells attuned to every detail, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the distant caw of a crow, the faint rustle of leaves that might betray more than the wind. Poirot heads toward the garden gate, a wrought iron structure, half hidden by ivy, tucked near the estate's perimeter. The gate is old but sturdy, its hinges creaking as he tests it. He examines the ground, noting fresh scuff marks in the dirt, as if someone had stood here recently, perhaps watching the manor. Kneeling, he spots a cigarette butt, its tip crushed into the soil, the brand unfamiliar but distinct, with a gold band around the filter. Carefully wraps it in his handkerchief, suspecting it could belong to the stranger. A careless visitor leaves a calling card, he murmurs, his mustache twitching with satisfaction. Nearby, he finds a broken twig, on a low bush, snapped at an angle that suggests someone brushed past in a hurry. The clues are subtle, but to Poirot, they speak volumes of presence, perhaps unwelcome. Lingered here, he follows the path along the garden's edge, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. Near a cluster of hydrangeas, he notices a patch of trampled grass, barely noticeable unless one is looking for it. The blades are bent, forming a faint outline, as if someone crouched or stood still for some time. Poirot crouches himself, picturing the scene, a figure in a dark coat, watching the manor's windows, perhaps the studies on the night Sir Reginald died. He glances toward the manor, calculating the line of sight. The study's window is visible from here, its curtains often open, as Grayson had mentioned. Could the stranger have seen something or been seen? Poirot's mind churns, connecting this spot to Clara's sketch and the receipt for J. Carver found in the study. Moving deeper into the garden, Poirot examines the hedge near the gate, where Clara's drawing placed the figure. Finds a small tear in the foliage, a few leaves caught on a jagged branch, and a single thread of dark wool snagged there, almost invisible against the green. He plucks it carefully, holding it to the light. A coat, perhaps, he muses, adding it to his collection of clues. The thread is coarse, not the fine fabric of the manor's inhabitants, suggesting an outsider. His thoughts drift to Lady Eleanor's reaction to the name J. Carver in the photograph she turned away. Was this stranger a ghost from the family's past, come to haunt Reginald? Poirot's investigation is interrupted by a rustling behind him. He turns to see Mrs. Poole, her apron dusted with flour, watching him from the path. "Monsieur Poirot, you'll catch a chill out here," she says. Her tone polite but her eyes curious. Poirot smiles, deflecting her scrutiny with a question. "Madame Poole, do you often walk these grounds at night?" She shakes her head, explaining she rarely leaves the kitchen after dark, but adds, "The gardeners mentioned odd tracks near the gate last week. Thought it was foxes?" Poirot nods, thanking her, but his mind is elsewhere. He asks if she ever saw Sir Reginald in the garden with visitors. Mrs. Poole hesitates, and admits, "Once a month ago, I saw him talking to a man near the fountain. Didn't recognize him. They seemed tense." Poirot presses for a description, but she shrugs. Too far to see clearly. Dark hair, maybe? Wore a long coat. The detail aligns with Clara's sketch, and Poirot's pulse quickens. As Mrs. Poole returns to the manor, Poirot continues his search, circling the fountain. He notices a small stone bench nearby, its surface weathered but clean, except for a faint smudge of dirt, as if someone sat there recently. He examines it closely, finding a partial footprint in the soft earth beside it. Too large for Clara or Lady Eleanor, too narrow for Grayson. It's another clue, pointing to an outsider's presence. Poirot stands, surveying the garden, his mind weaving together the cigarette butt, the wool thread, the trampled grass, and the footprint. They form a trail, faint but undeniable, leading to someone who came to Blackwood Manor with purpose. He decides to return to Clara, to press her about the sketch and the man she saw, hoping to clarify the stranger's identity as he heads back toward the manor. The garden feels less serene, its beauty masking a quiet menace. The clues he's gathered, the journal's cryptic entries, the receipt, the photograph, and now the garden's secrets are like stars in a constellation, their pattern not yet clear but forming. Poirot knows the truth is near, hidden in the interplay of these silent traces, and he must keep searching to reveal it. The manor looms ahead, its windows like eyes watching his every move, and he senses the next conversation will bring him closer to the heart of the mystery. Chapter 9. Clara's confession, Hercule Poirot, makes his way back to the conservatory of Blackwood Manor, where the late afternoon light filters through the glass panes, casting a soft glow on the lush greenery within. The air is warm and humid, heavy with the scent of blooming orchids and damp soil, stark contrast to the chilly tension that permeates the rest of the manor. Poirot's mind is a whirl of clues: the cigarette butt, the wool thread, the partial footprint from the garden, the mysterious J. Carver from the receipt. Clara's sketch of the shadowy figure looms large in his thoughts, its details too precise to be mere imagination. He's requested another meeting with Clara Blackwood, sensing she's holding back a piece of the puzzle, and he intends to coax it from her with his trademark blend of charm and relentless precision. His gray cells hum, ready to unravel the threads of her story. Clara is already there, perched on the same wicker chair as before, her sketchbook open on her lap. Her fingers tracing the edges of a new drawing, a delicate rendering of a lily, its petals almost lifelike. She looks up as Poirot enters, her green eyes wary but softer than before, as if she's been wrestling with a decision. "Monsieur Poirot," she says, her voice quieter than in their last meeting, "you wanted to see me again?" Poirot offers a warm smile, bowing slightly before taking a seat opposite her. "Mademoiselle Clara, your sketch has been most illuminating," he begins, his tone gentle but probing. "The figure in the gardenette is no mere fancy, is it? I must know what you saw and what you know." His words are direct, but his eyes are kind, inviting trust. Clara's hands pause on the sketchbook, and she exhales, her shoulders sagging. "Slightly. I wasn't entirely honest before," she admits, her voice barely above a whisper. "I did see someone that night, the night before Uncle Reginald died. It wasn't just a sketch from imagination." Poirot leans forward, his hands folded, his expression encouraging her to continue. She describes standing at her bedroom window, unable to sleep, when she noticed a man near the garden gate. He was tall, in a dark coat, standing so still, just watching the house, she says. "I couldn't see his face, but he seemed familiar somehow." Poirot asks if she sketched him immediately. Clara nods, flipping to the drawing he'd seen before, the man's outline now hauntingly vivid in the context of her words. "I drew it to remember, to make sense of it," she says, her voice trembling. Poirot presses gently, asking why she didn't mention this sooner. Clara's eyes flicker with guilt. "I was scared," she confesses. "Uncle Reginald had been so strange those last days, secretive, angry. I thought maybe the man was someone he knew, someone he didn't want us to know about."
As
She pauses, then adds, "He'd been getting letters, ones he wouldn't let me see. He burned one in the study while I was there a week ago. Said it was nothing, but his hands were shaking." As Poirot's mind flashes to the ashes he found, the burned fragments now tucked in his handkerchief. He asks if she saw the letters. "Contents." Clara shakes her head. Only a glimpse black ink, slanted writing. "Urgent." Sensing her openness, Poirot shifts to the name J. Carver, showing her the receipt from the study. "Does this name mean anything to you, mademoiselle?" Clara's face pales, and for a moment she seems to retreat inward. "Heard it before," she says finally. "Years ago when I was a child, Cole Reginald mentioned a man named Carver, someone he did business with, I think. But he stopped talking about him after a while. Thought he was gone, maybe dead." Her voice wavers, and Poirot notes the fear in her eyes, as if the name carries a weight she can't fully grasp. He asks if she ever saw this Carver. Shakes her head, but her fingers tighten on the sketchbook. Betraying her unease, Poirot changes tack, asking about her uncle's mood in the days before his death. Clara describes him as distracted, often locking himself in his study, speaking in low tones on the telephone. "He argued with someone a few nights before," she says. "I was passing by the study and heard him shouting something about no more payments. It ends now. I didn't stay to listen." He hated being overheard. Poirot's gray cells spark, connecting her words to Mrs. Poole's mention of raised voices and the journal's cryptic entry about debts repaid. He asks if she noticed anyone else acting strangely, Dr. Vance, Mrs. Poole, or Grayson. Clara hesitates, then says, "Dr. Vance was here more than usual, always with that bag of his, and Grayson is always so calm, but I saw him lingering outside the study once, like he was listening." As the conversation deepens, Poirot notices a small locket around Clara's neck, half hidden by her collar. "A keepsake, mademoiselle?" he asks lightly. Clara touches it instinctively, then nods. "It was my father's. Uncle Reginald gave it to me after he died." Her voice softens, and Poirot senses a deep loyalty to her uncle, but also a growing fear of the truth. He asks one final question. "Did you ever hear the phrase 'silent no more' from your uncle?" Clara's eyes widen, and she nods slowly.
"All once,"
she whispers. "He muttered it to himself a few days before he died, when he thought I wasn't listening. I don't know what it meant." Poirot nods, his mind racing. The phrase a thread tying the note to Reginald's final days. He rises to leave. "Poirot, thanks, Clara," his voice warm but firm. "You have been most courageous, as mademoiselle. Your words bring us closer to the truth." Clara manages a small smile, but her hands clutch the sketchbook tightly as if it's her anchor. Poirot steps out of the conservatory, the humid air clinging to his coat, his thoughts swirling. Clara's confession, the stranger, the burned letter, the name Carver. The overheard argument adds new layers to the mystery. He decides to confront Dr. Vance again, to probe his frequent visits and the contents of his medical bag. The manor's secrets are unraveling like threads pulled from a tapestry, and Poirot knows the next step will bring him closer to the heart of the silent motive. Chapter 10. The silent motive revealed. The grand drawing room of Blackwood Manor is bathed in the golden glow of evening, its chandeliers casting a warm shimmer over the assembled household. Hercule Poirot stands at the center, his small frame commanding the space with an air of quiet authority. His mustache is impeccably groomed, his eyes sharp as he surveys the faces before him. Lady Eleanor, pale but composed. Clara, clutching her sketchbook.
Cut!
Dr. Vance, his spectacles glinting nervously. Mrs. Poole, her hands folded tightly, and Grayson, the butler, standing rigid as a statue. The tension in the room is palpable, like the stillness before a storm. Poirot has summoned them to reveal the truth behind Sir Reginald Blackwood's death. And his gray cells have pieced together the puzzle, the burned letter, the cryptic journal, the receipt for J. Carver, the garden clues, and Clara's confession. He clears his throat, his voice calm but resonant. Madame et messieurs, the time has come to unveil the silent motive that led to the death of Sir Reginald. It was no suicide, but a murder most cunning. Poirot begins by addressing the locked study, the heart of the mystery. The door was locked, the key missing, yet a man was dead inside. How could a murderer enter and leave? The answer lies in the spare key. He turns to Mrs. Poole, whose eyes widen. Madame Poole, you said the spare key was in your locked box, accessible only to you and Monsieur Grayson. But you also mentioned items moved, papers out of place. The key was taken, used, and returned before you noticed. Mrs. Poole opens her mouth to protest, but Poirot raises a hand. Not by you, madame, but by one who knew its location. He shifts his gaze to Grayson, whose composure falters for a moment. Monsieur Grayson, you fetched the key that night, but you hesitated when I asked if it was where it should be. You knew it had been used. Poirot then unveils the clues from the study, the untouched brandy glass, the burned letters' ashes, and the journal's cryptic entries. Sir Reginald was a man of habit, yet he left his brandy untouched to sign he was interrupted. The journal spoke of debts repaid, and he knows. The ashes confirmed a letter was destroyed, one, too dangerous to keep. He produces the receipt for J. Carver, holding it up. This name, Monsieur Carver, is the key. Lady Eleanor, you recognized it, did you not? Lady Eleanor's face tightens, but she remains silent. Poirot continues, turning to Clara. Mademoiselle Clara, your sketch of the man in the garden, seen the night before the death, matches the description of a man Madame Poole saw with Sir Reginald weeks earlier, a man in a dark coat. Poirot paces, his voice steady. Let us reconstruct. 10 years ago, Sir Reginald was involved in a business deal with a man named Jonathan Carver, a dealer in rare books, but it was no ordinary deal. Carver was a swindler, and Reginald, desperate to save the manor from financial ruin after his brother's death, joined him in a scheme to forge and sell rare manuscripts. They profited, but Carver grew greedy, demanding more. Reginald cut ties, believing Carver gone, but Carver returned recently with threats to expose the fraud unless Reginald paid him. Poirot points to the journal. The entry he knows refers to Carver. The burned letter was his demand for payment, which Reginald destroyed in fear. He turns to Dr. Vance, whose hands tremble. Doctor, your frequent visits were not just medical. You knew of Reginald's past, did you not? You were his confidant? And you carried messages between him and Carver, hidden in your medical bag. Vance's face crumples, and he nods. I only helped him keep it quiet, he mutters. I didn't know it would lead to this. Poirot nods, then faces Grayson. And you, Monsieur Grayson, overheard Reginald's arguments with Carver? Did you not? You lingered outside the study, as Mademoiselle Clara saw. You knew of Carver's threats, and you saw a chance to act. Poirot's voice grows solemn. The night of the death, Carver came to the manor, entering through the garden gate. The cigarette butt, the wool thread, the footprints, these were his traces. He used the spare key, taken earlier from Mrs. Poole's box, to enter the study. He confronted Reginald, demanding payment. Reginald refused, saying silent no more, vowing to confess the fraud to protect his family. In a rage, Carver shot him with Reginald's own pistol, staging it as suicide. He locked the door, returned the key, and fled, leaving no trace but those in the garden. Poirot pauses, letting the weight of his words settle. Carver is the murderer, but he was not alone in guilt. Each of you hid pieces of the truth, Lady Eleanor. Your silence protected the family's name. Clara, your fear kept you from speaking fully. Vance, your loyalty blinded you. Grayson and Poole, your discretion shielded a killer. The room is silent, faces ashen. Lady Eleanor speaks first, her voice breaking. I knew of the fraud, but I thought it was over. I never imagined. Clara clutches her locket, tears in her eyes. Poirot softens his tone. The motive was silent greed, shame, and fear of exposure. But Hercule Poirot sees what is hidden. Carver will be found, and justice will be served. He bows slightly, his work complete. As the household disperses, stunned, Poirot steps toward the window, gazing at the darkening garden. The manor's secrets are laid bare, and the truth, once silent, now speaks loudly. This is the end of our tale, but the story lives on in your thoughts. If you've enjoyed this journey with Poirot, like and subscribe for more mysteries, and share your theories in the comments below. Until next time, keep your gray cells sharp.